I might ask Scarborough to pay me back.
Okay. And the Nick Rack ones, is that going through too, or a couple for Nick Rack?
Don't know yet.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if they got the last I checked. Again, wasn't sure if they had the grant money yet.
Oh, interesting. Who's the new PI for that?
It'd be Galen.
Is it Galen? Okay.
It'd be Galen if it works out. Because Joe Morris can't, because he's the one who's controlling the money.
Oh.
find an inside stairway to get from the second floor down to here.
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess there's an elevator.
Maybe. Good on,
I think it's,
good on.
well, anyway, it's on this.
Oh, down there?
It's more on the north side.
Yeah,
Well, I knew there was an outside entrance, so I just went outside again.
yeah.
It's a non-exercise class day, so I
That you needed your steps.
needed the steps.
Right. Have to do what we can to get this stuff done.
Well, I got.
Oh, got them. Oh, okay. Okay. You
Karen got
it. Okay.
Oh, free candy.
You're lucky day.
Yeah, I didn't know we had so many extra money lying around.
We had extra pens lying around.
Oh, extra.
This is how it works.
Okay, you give them can, not money. I understand fixed costs.
And they may or may not look like more than our also.
They've been extra pens for too many years.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, you're almost through, so I'm just thinking it's like the last 3 years.
Over the last 3 years.
Hopefully, I've got Gary Hope wants to do another thing for Betsy and stuff.
I got this one. Stand up.
Those are pretty well canned, right? Those are all.
Yeah, and then I'm in this,
Like this.
this Thursday, I'm signing it.
Like it. So it's like, I'm carrying that
I'm
crap.
off on Friday, my wife's having knee surgery, so she, yeah, she doesn't know when she'll be out of there, so I just decided to take a whole day. Sure. She's got a torn meniscus.
My wife's got
Yeah, it's been bothering her for a long time. Definitely not getting any better. She's trying to, now she's trying to fix.
Oh my God.
It's all skin.
That, that would be interesting.
Yep.
I'll be back working
Part-time, kind of feel like it.
Yeah.
And some of them just.
He goes in Tuesday, Friday. It's outpatient.
Oh,
Yeah. It's amazing.
I just wanted to do laser eye surgery. Sounds exciting.
Yeah, so I mean, if it's an actual cutting open, yeah, it's more to worry about it.
Sure, ready to see you go. That's great.
Then
Well, hopefully it'll go great. You've got it. Hopefully that'll be I'm liking it. It's perfect for
Thanks so much for the help.
I was wondering. Okay.
do it either way.
Her already works on offers overtime, so I think she'll take that for a little while. You know, and something went wonky with the scheduling at Hy-Vee where she only wanted to work 1 weekend day and she got scheduled for 3 against the days. And she's like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I don't blame you. No, she's kind of been on the road. Morning. Good morning. Let me go grab my okay.
Not now, whatever.
Okay, yeah.
But about a minute or two before we start. I usually record this early, so, just so I don't forget. It's so easy.
No, you don't trust
It's
it.
that stupid button.
Well, they just.
Stupid green button as opposed to a red button.
They tend to just repeat what they've seen.
Sounds like a letter needs to be written. That's all.
That one I give a
I
lot
don't want
of
that
credit.
being green, I want that red.
Not, not that they're necessarily wrong, but I think they're just what they know is.
Contact
the
me.
other
Or-
series.
HQ.
Well, it would've been hard for them to.
No.
Or at least make it a selectable option, whatever you want, and you should be able to pick, if you want more enjoy it. I mean, ones are ready to use two choices, you want something.
Well, our world red is record.
Right.
Yeah, it's always been that way.
Maybe in a minute, we'll go get you mic'd up, is that? Yep.
So let me get some tough questions from you today.
I'll do it.
You're up for the challenge, right? Should be good. Okay. Gene, is Tom coming? Is Tom coming?
You can just tap your shoulder or something. I'll try to look when I can.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wendong Zhang. I'm assistant professor of economics and extension economist at Iowa State University, and I'm leading this year's ISU land value survey. So to a lot of you in this room, I'm the new Mike Duffy. So, but I told Mike is still my home association treasurer. We meet occasionally, so to make sure that I don't say something that is off the track too much. Before I go into the results for this year's land value survey, I wanted to give you a little background about myself. So I grew up in a rural county in western part of Shandong province. So this province is the northeastern part of China. So it's where Confucius was born about 2,000 years ago as well. So this is a rural county by Chinese standard. So this rural county only has 1 million population. So it's roughly only 20% of the Iowa population. And I attended college in Shanghai and Hong Kong to give you a little background about where things are in China. So I grew up in this little town in this in the inland part of this coastal province. Right across the sea is South Korea, and Shanghai is roughly here in the middle of at the end of the Yangtze River. And in the junior year, I went to University of Hong Kong as an exchange student. That's one of the events that kindled my interest to see the outside world, so I went to the United States afterwards. Why I have this line here is because west of this line, you have Tibet, so it's 12,000 feet or above, or you have Gobi Desert and a bunch of other deserts above. So essentially, it's very inhabitable for most crops and a lot of people. So 94% of the population in China, 94% of the 1,400 million people live east of this line. So I got my PhD from the Ag Econ department at Ohio State University in July 2014. A month later, I started my job here. One of the key reasons I got hired is in my dissertation, I analyzed what drives Ohio farmland value. So I have some background analyzing the farmland markets in the Midwest. In Ohio, I'm interested in analyzing how the urban influence impacts farmland markets, while here it's mainly agricultural influences. Right? So. And as an extension economist, my portfolio includes three primary things. One is the farmland is the key component. So I work on the land value survey that's done every year since 1941. This is the only survey that provides county level estimates. And I'm now currently conducting a survey that is the Iowa Farmland Ownership and Tenure Survey that's done every 5 years. So next spring, we'll release the 2017 results for that. That's actually it's required by the Iowa legislature to give you idea of who own land and do they cash rent or crop share, and what is the anticipated transfer. So please watch for that. One of the more exciting thing of my research and the extension portfolio is I'm also starting to work more on the Chinese agriculture things. So I'm actually encouraging you guys all have one of the folders for the land value portal you all already know, but also you have a one-pager showcase the new China Ag Center at ISU. So we all know the former governor of Iowa, Governor Branstad, now is the U.S. ambassador to China. So the university want to capitalize on this opportunity to introduce key agricultural markets and policy developments in China to U.S. stakeholders and landowners, farmers as well. So Dr. Dermot Hayes and I are leading this effort. So we just set up a mini center in collaboration with the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences. So if you go to this site, Card China, and you will see more information. We have put out articles about China's corn policy, ethanol mandate, and a host of other things. So I will mention that later in this presentation as well. But so another thing about my hometown. So So if you think about China, China roughly has the same latitudes as the United States, has the same total land area, but only much less arable land in terms of land that can be farmed. So the total land area is roughly similar or slightly bigger than the United States, but a lot of them are in deserts or mountains or like very in parts that is very hard to get access to. Where my hometown is roughly the same latitude as Kansas. So 20-some years ago, it was all corn-wheat rotation. But in my neck of the woods, people are doing double cropping. So it's both corn and wheat. But they have my hometown village, my grandpa's village, has gone through a significant transformation in terms of what they are growing, alongside China's economic transformation. So if you look at the village now, it looks like this, rather than regular corn and wheat fields. So it's the greenhouses, high tunnel greenhouses, where they have the straw beds that is rolled up during the day and put down during nights. So this is my uncle holding his grandson inside this. They're mainly growing cucumbers and honeydews. So, but this is also related to what we're talking about, because if you look at where my hometown is, so that's denoted by the star here. Remember, this is a rural county, so a lot of the produce are not sent to local farmers market for the local consumption. Instead, they're shipped to mainly through truck to major metropolitan area. North of here is Beijing, it's China's capital, and there's another major city is called Tianjin. So Beijing and Tianjin each have like 21 and 15 million people. So the cucumbers are shipped there, but this is, if you think about where the relative location, it's only take about 4 hours on the road to ship the produce, fresh produce, to the supermarkets in these large mega cities. So that's why not everywhere could make this transformation, because we are talking about farmland. If you think about real estate, when you talk with any brokers, right? So location, location, location is what they tell you. This is what matters here as well. And a lot of those, but you can see why they did the transformation recently is because that with Chinese economic development, there's better transportation network, and there's better technology to refridge, store the fresh produce as well. So those made things happening. So those are actually like 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, the village made made a transformation before this to table grape. So the income compared to corn-wheat rotation increased 10 times by growing these fresh vegetables. But today, our key topic is farmland market. So why we care about farmland market is when we are looking at, from the U.S. agricultural sector perspective, the farmland markets, the value of land and buildings on it, consistently account for 80 to 85% of all U.S. farm assets. So that's denoted by the yellow bar here, and the total height of this represents the total value of all U.S. farm assets. Right. If you think about from a single producer perspective, farmland tends to be the largest single investment item a farmer tends to make in decades. And if you have debt, farmland tends to be the major source of collaterals and tends to be representing a major chunk of the debt holding and the mortgage as well. So it's very significant. So the value of the farmland is very significant both for the U.S. ag economy, but also for the single landowner and producers. So how we get information? A lot of time we rely on surveys. I will introduce you some of the surveys. Then ISU Land Value Survey is one of the surveys that has been here for a long time. And this year, in addition to the traditional paper copy of the survey, we are also offering online participation mode as well. So this year we got responses from 710 respondents. So these are agricultural professionals. I'll give you more details about who our respondents are. And they provided, so each of them typically provide only land value estimates for their primary county, but some provide land value estimates for more than one county. And 64% of the respondents actually this year responded online. And all these numbers are record level compared to before. So typically we only have like 500 respondents. And last year, this is the second year, this is the third year we rolled out the online mode. So before, at best, we were getting 45% of the people responding online. So more and more people are doing it online. They get more familiar with this. You can actually do it using your phone as well. And I really would like to thank the partners we have through the agricultural community, including that Kyle is leading the Realtor Land Institute survey, and we got a lot of help from the ag companies like Hertz, People's Company, Farmers National, and a lot of other major ag media as well. I'm currently the academic vice president for the Iowa chapter of American Society of Farm Managers, Rural Appraisers, and we also get a lot of help from the Iowa Bankers Association. So those surveys cannot be made possible without the incredible help from the community. So I really appreciate the help and the collaboration, long-term collaboration between the university and the agricultural community, because if you think about the survey, the history, it started in 1941. It's the first of its sort in the nation, but I always want to caution you that, like Kyle's survey, we're conducting this opinion survey, although we try to do it to make sure that we only solicit response to knowledgeable individuals, so it's expert opinion survey. So the respondents typically are agricultural professionals, so farm managers, appraisers, brokers, lenders, county assessors, and I will give you more information about those. And if you think about the purpose of the survey, is designed to give you an idea of where the market is going. So it gives you some general idea of the trend of the market, so the percentage change probably matters more when you're thinking about how you should compare this survey with USDA survey, Chicago Fed survey, and the ROI survey. I think percentage change is more important because that is more internally consistent number. So I don't want you to go to the county table and find out the county number dollar amount and say this is my land is worse. So that's not the purpose. If you want to do that, you probably want to go talk with appraiser to get appraisal report, or as a minimum, you can find one of the appraisal report you've done 5-6 years ago and figure out how the land market have changed over time using some of the survey, or look into the recent comparable sales for land parcel that is similar to your particular one. But this one does provide valuable information. If you look across all the other sources, this is the only one that provides county level land value information since 1950. And again, if you go to the land value portal, card farmland, you can see all the information listed there for your county as well. Yep. So, and as a general rule, feel free to interrupt me, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them. So a little background about who the respondents are and how they are distributed. We don't have the even distribution of the respondents because we don't have even distribution of crops and farmers across the state. So when we're looking at the distribution, typically we especially lack responses in the southern part of the state, which is natural because we have less farmers and less ag professionals working in those areas. So in general, you see that in Northwest, we have more respondents, and in Northeast and in Central, and so you have more people because a lot of the companies actually are located in these areas as well. So when we are looking at how the responses are broken into different categories, typically the vast majority of the respondents are agricultural professionals. So we have the most responses from ag lenders, followed by brokers, realtors, farm managers, rural appraisers, and we also have information from people working in the government, mainly the county assessor's office. So when we're rolling out the results, we try to do a robustness check to say, for example, only looking at the responses from the agricultural professionals and only looking at people who had responded before. And this year we also did that. So in general, we find very similar results. So, and people have, in our sample, these agricultural professionals are fairly experienced. So, which is consistent if you look at the average age for the producers. I think across the United States, the average age for producers, according to the last census, was 58. And the owners is probably 65 or above. In Iowa, actually, half the land are owned by owners 65 or above. 30% owned by 75 or above. And if you look at how many counties they service, one of the stark differences why this highlights why we want to solicit responses from the agricultural professionals, because county assessors typically only care about their own county or maybe the neighboring county, right? So landowners typically only care about a subset of the county in general as well. But if you look at, in general, the farm managers, rural appraisers, and brokers and lenders, and they tend to work with more counties. So they tend to follow more closely what's going on, and they also track, some of them also track what's going on in the auction as well. And a lot of them has significant, so on average, our respondents have 25 years of experience. So they are really experienced respondents, and they have seen the survey way before that I saw it, probably even before I was born. So, which is really good. So we have fairly stable respondents. So we have this. So that's one of the reasons why we have consistent results over time. That's why I want to stress that if you want to look at how to interpret the survey, focus on the percentage change. Okay. So what is the key number? The key number from this year's survey is there is a 2% increase in Iowa farmland markets, which is consistent with other surveys I will show you. On average, we're reporting a 2% increase in average farmland values across all farmland qualities from $71.83 to $73.26 per acre as of November 1st, 2017. We also offer breakdowns by land quality. So high quality land up by 2% as well. Medium quality 2.2%. Low quality only 0.5%. I will get into why I think lower quality land show a more modest increase. At least I think the declining CRP payments is one of the reasons. So I will get into more of the details, but let's focus on the aggregate number. So 2% increase, what does that mean? So here is a map that shows you how Iowa farmland values on average have changed according to the ISU land value survey since 1941. So the red line here is inflation-adjusted values adjusted to 2015 dollars. So recognizing that $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. And the blue line is the raw data from the original survey. So this is the original data sets that what we have been reported for the Iowa land value survey. Okay, so if we think about this, here is the percentage. Here is a figure that shows you the percentage change in Iowa farmland value in nominal terms. Essentially, it's the same figure transposed, rather than showing you the dollar per acre over time, showing you how things have changed over time, right? So in percentage term. This 2% increase represents for the first time that Iowa farmland market increased after 3 years of consecutive declines. How big is this? Last year I was saying that it is the first time that Iowa farmland markets have shown consecutive 3-year decline since the 1980 farm crisis. So this figure shows you when you see a bar that is pointing north, that shows that in 2000, for example, in 2013, there's increase over a year ago. So this year represents there are 2% increase for the Iowa farmland values compared to a year ago, right? So if you think about the significance, this is the first time that the farmland market have shown an increase after falling off its peak in 2013. Does this mean we see a turn of the farmland market? Will we pass this declining and go back to the phenomenal growth period 10, 15 years ago? I think I probably want to caution on that a little bit. Because if you think about what is driving the farmland market hike, one of the key reasons is limited supply. So this is a little dated number, but this year's figure shows very similarly in terms of the trend. So this shows you through Farm Credit Services data a month-by-month number of auctions over time since 2011. So if you look at the peak years in 2011 and 2012, there's way more number of sales, number of auctions going on the market compared to what we have experienced over the last 3 years. So in 2015, 2016, 2017, we see more flat, more limited land supplies. So think about you are a hog barn owner, you are a livestock producer in northwest Iowa, you want to find nearby acres to spread the manure. Back in the day, you have 5 or 6 candidate parcels in the 20-mile, 30-mile radius you're looking at, but now you only see 2. A lot of times, people are willing to put a little extra to pay for that because if you don't buy it, your neighbor probably want to buy that. So you have, because of limited land supply, that will help. So think about the Econ 101, less supply, higher prices. So I think that's one of the key reasons why we're seeing this bump. And if we think about long term ahead, I think this could potentially just be a temporary break in continued stagnation and declines in the near future. Because I will show you some of the reasons. Because if you look at the economic fundamentals, it hasn't improved quite a bit yet. So a little bit more on the, yeah.
Curiosity.
Yes.
We've been talking about the limited supply of farmland for
several
years now. Why? Do we know why there's such a limited supply?
So let me get to that. So typically, here this year, we reported 44% of the people reported they saw less sale activity compared to a year ago. Only 20% reported more activity. So if we convert that to a figure, that shows you a busy figure that shows you like each of the line represents percent of people reported more, less, or the similar sales compared to a year ago. So we created a little simpler figure that shows you a sale activity index where we use percentage of people who reported more sales minus percent of people reported less plus 100. So if you see this line, this blue line, more than 100, then more people expected greater number of sale activities compared to a year ago. Look at what happened in recent years. Consistently, there are less and less activities. So this year, we see this degree is not to a year ago, but there's still less activity compared to a year ago. My theory is when you are having a down years, so that's indicated in this orange bar. That's what I showed you earlier in terms of percentage change. So essentially, this is the sale activity overlaid with percentage change, right? So in these declines, if you look at this sale activity, it's almost tracks this fairly closely. When land markets tend to retract, then sale activity go down a little bit as well, which is intuitive where the landowner, when they see declining land market, they tend to hold on to the land if they don't urgently need the money. Right? So they want to hope for a little better price. And when you are looking at Iowa and across the Midwest, typically you see more buyers than more sellers. So if you look at from the other angle that look at people from the owner and tenant's perspective, there are more people who want to rent your land than the tenants that you can so you're more easy to find a willing tenant who can take whatever the cash rent you want them to give you than the other way, right? So if you think about our number compared to other sources, ISU Land Value Survey is one of the 4 surveys that offer land value information through an opinion survey. The others, so Kyle led the Realtor Land Institute survey, and there is a Chicago Fed survey. There's also USDA survey. So one of the key differences is, so we use our respondents, including farm managers, ag lenders, rural appraisers, brokers, and Realtor Land Institute survey typically includes farm managers, brokers, and appraisers. And Chicago Fed survey is a survey of bank president and ag lenders. And USDA survey is a producer survey. So it's a producer survey of asking you what you think your particular parcel will be worth this year. So USDA survey in terms of methodology is most different from the other 3. But this year we're reporting, typically every year we report fairly similar numbers. If you think about what the results from the Realtor Land Institute survey, and on the right is what we reported this year. On average, Kyle's Realtor Land Institute survey reported a 3% increase over the last year. And we reported 2%. So I think it's fairly similar. If you look at the USDA survey, so the timing is slightly different. So the Realtor Land Institute survey is September to September. Ours is November to November. And Chicago Fed is October to October, and USDA is June to June. But still, so the USDA survey reported a 2.3% increase in farmland values. So what they call the ag real estate values. It's the value of the land and the buildings. Right? So if you look at the pasture land values, there's a 1.5% increase. And there's no change for cropland values. So, but in general, we're seeing fairly similar results. If you look at the Chicago Fed survey in their November ag letter, so they're reporting changes from October a year ago to this October. they reported 2% increase in Iowa good quality farmland compared to a year ago. They reported no change compared to a quarter. And if you look across the state, they reported some variations. So in the eastern part of the state, they reported stronger growth, 2-3%. In eastern Iowa, 1% in other places. So which is interesting and consistent with our survey as well. So the only place there where the reported loss is in central Iowa, where we actually, later I will show you that we actually reported a loss only for south central Iowa as well. So just to give you this is just showing you that a lot of those surveys, although they are different in terms of the survey methodology, you probably don't want to compare, say, the direct dollar amount from one survey to another, but the percentage change is more comparable across the surveys. Right? So, however, if you stare closely with this report, they not only look at Iowa farmland values, look at the other I states that you know. What happened in their markets? Illinois and Indiana. They all reported declines. That's where one of the reasons why I have my caution, and because I don't think there are fundamental differences that put Iowa farmland market on top of the other two I states. If you look at, I will give you more details on that, but if you look at all the other surrounding states from another Federal Reserve Bank, this is the Federal Reserve Bank from Kansas City, reporting the states west of us and south of us. Right? So if you look at all the states, Kansas, from Nebraska, Oklahoma, mountain states, Missouri, they all reported a loss. Right? Although it's still modest, but statistically, 1% increase and 1% decrease is probably all equal to 0, right? So no survey reported 20% increase or 20% decline, but now I think we're in a process. It's safe to say that we're in a stabilization period, but I hesitate to say that we're in a turnaround where we will go back to the golden years. Right? So here are some other reasons why I think we shouldn't rush into the conclusion that there is a turn of the land market, because if you look at the inflation-adjusted values, the inflation actually rose more than 2%. So the inflation-adjusted land values actually decreased 0.2%. Right? So the inflation-adjusted value essentially stayed flat. So I wouldn't read too much from the 2% increase, although I can show you that this mild increase already gave a lot of people like a great confidence of the future hikes in future markets as well. Again, I told you if we will look at the other two I states, this is Purdue University's Indiana Farmland Value Survey. They reported consistently top to average to poor all declines in land markets. Right? So this is so the top actually stayed constant. Right? So stayed constant, but a lot of other states show declines, and more recently, all land have declined in their surveys. So this is June, so it's the timing is a little off, but still, it's not over the board showing increase across the Midwest. Illinois similarly as well. So this is from January 1 to January 2017. They're looking into more of, they probably will release the survey soon this year, which might be very similar to what we reported, a mild increase or stagnation as well. But fundamentally, the economic fundamental hasn't changed that much to hail a permanent turnaround of the farm market. Right? So one of the key reasons is when we are looking at the land markets, one of the simple formula is land values equals net income divided by interest rate. So The net income can be characterized by the U.S. farm income, where this is USDA long-term forecast. They did it in 2016. Although they're showing that the worst declines are probably behind us, they didn't forecast a substantial rebound in the farm income, but more flat, maybe gradual improvement. I think this is probably more relevant for the long-term trajectory in terms of land markets. On top of this, that's the numerator of the formula, right? So the income side. In terms of the interest rate side, we are saying probably gradual increase. At least the Federal Reserve will hope that. So we have a new Federal Reserve chair, but Chair Powell used to be the part of the committee as well. So he's not a radical change. Likely he will follow what Chair Janet Yellen was doing. So they will gradually increase the interest rate. So not a whole lot, not quickly, but gradually will still increase that. Right? Another thing about the economic fundamentals, this is from my colleague, Chet Hart. So he has a nickname, it's Dr. Doom. So he didn't earn that from nothing, right? So he still put out a picture that shows you what the crop margin might look like. So if you look at potential forecasted crop margins based on actual yields, so actual yields will be a little higher than the trend line yields typically, right? So I think we have 4 out of 5. So over the last 4 out of 5 years, we tend to have record yields consistently, or at least a record production, right? So, but currently we also have a pretty wide basis. So the difference between the future prices that you can get from the Chicago CME to what the farmers actually received, the difference is pretty wide. And accounting for those, you see that the soy and corn margin on average is break even, or maybe slightly lower. So break even for soybeans and maybe even slightly lower for corn. So although you will still have the spring weather rally that the farmer could take advantage of through the ag marketing, but in general, I think only 20% of the farmers take advantage of free pre-harvesting marketing strategies to take advantage of better prices, right? So, but this figure, the purpose of this figure is showing you that we're probably seeing like more flat income. So the production costs have decreased. Probably will still continue to decrease a little bit, but the prices stay fairly flat. So the income likely will stay flat. Maybe mild increase, not dramatic increase. That's my general sense of where the land markets might go. Right, so that's the general sense. Any questions so far before I go into the district information? So if not, this is the land values by crop reporting district and by land quality. Consistently, you see fairly similar trends. So except for South Central, which reported declines, and Southwest reported no change, all the other districts reported mild, modest increase. And one of probably the key difference is the lower quality land reported much lower increase or more declines compared to others. Right, so I want to give you some ideas of why I'm thinking why things are different. So here is one of the things that is probably very important that you may not realize, that I used to live in Ohio for 6 years. When I think about Iowa, I always thought Iowa is flat cornfields all around. Right? So when I was driving from Columbus, Ohio to Ames, Iowa, you notice that Illinois has flatter, and Indiana and Illinois has flatter land than a lot of the places in Iowa. And so far, I have taken my daughters to Decorah, Iowa. You see the nice rolling hills and cows. You realize that's that's a heterogeneity across the landscape, even for predominantly agricultural states like Iowa. Right? For example, where I mentioned Decorah, northeast Iowa accounts for over half of milk cows across the states. So the crops and livestock and pastures are not equally distributed. Go back to the formula I mentioned earlier to you. Land values equals net income divided by interest rate. Interest rate is fairly universal. You go to DC, go to Chicago, go to LA, you roughly get the same interest rate, right? But the income is very localized. That's what makes the farmland market localized as well. And if you think about the Northeast, then the dairy prices matters more. So the dairy market returns matter more for their returns, and they're reporting slightly better growth, for example, than West Central, right? So, and if you look at the distribution of hog and cattle industry, Northwest has more of those. So back in 2014, when every district reported loss, they actually reported increase because in 2014, that's a phenomenal growth year for the livestock industry. That helped their localized net income as well. If you think about the net lower quality, in this survey, we didn't say this is cropland value, this is a farmland, so this includes all land qualities. So the lower quality could include timber and pasture in it. So when you are looking at where the timber and pasture are located, in addition to Northeast, have a lot of the woodland, it's mainly in the southern part of the state. While comparatively, that central Iowa and west central has disproportionately more corn and soybean acreage, where the continued decline in crop market fundamentals have impacted their market more. Right? So remember that if you think about the pasture and timber, they could also sometimes be eligible for conservation programs like CRP, so conservation reserve programs. And because they use the formula of using weighted average of last 3 years of cash rent, so the cash rent is going down, so that payment is going down as well. I can show you that if you think about the CRP payments, this is the distribution of the acres enrolled in CRP. So the more blue you see is where the more acres are. So more acres in the southern part and some more acres along the Mississippi River. But what is more relevant is when you compare this year's rental rate with last year's. Consistently, you see decline, so except for the blue, which is increasing the rental rate. All the other states, all the other counties across Iowa reported loss, the reduction in CRP rental rates this year compared to a year ago. So from down 5%, the light yellow is down 5 to 10%, and the more red is down almost 20%, and the orange is down 10 to 15%. So in the southern part, on average, the state declined 5% in terms of the CRP rental rate. So those hasn't been as strong as previous years, and we're hitting the cap, which is 24 million acres. So not all eligible acres who want to get into the program could get into the program. So the buffer is no longer as strong. Right. If you look at the crop yields, why we are seeing stronger growth in eastern part of the state is because this is the 2017 corn and soybean yields. And this number, the first percentage change is a percentage change over a year ago. So compared to the 2016 yields. And the last one is over the 5-year average yields. Right. So for Northeast and East Central, those are the only 2 districts that reported gains in the corn yields compared to a year ago, because last year I think is a record yield. Right. So that's why we're seeing fairly stronger growth in those areas. While in South Central and Southeast, because of the drought condition, a lot of places, especially in South Central, they didn't get enough moisture for the crop production. That hurt the yields, that hurts the profits, and that hurts the land markets as well. That is reflected in a decline in the southern part of the state. Right? Similar story for the soybean as well. So if you think about Northeast Central and East Central are more stronger in corn growth, corn yields. Those are showing up in these like more blue numbers, so more higher growth compared to other places. Right? So while in southern part they reported less growth. Right? Another thing I mentioned about the dairy prices. This is the Chicago Fed prices reported in October compared to, this is the crop prices and livestock prices. Compared the hog and cattle prices, they all reported lost 10 to 25% loss compared to 2 years ago. But dairy prices is roughly the same. So the dairy sector is doing relatively better compared to other livestock sectors. Right? And if you think about the corn and soybean prices, one increased 2%, one declined 1%, stay fairly flat. And recently they actually saw additional dip, I think. Right? So that's why I think there are reasons, those are some of the plausible reasons, recognizing that there are inherently things that we cannot explain every part. So you get what you get, right? So, but because in part is because that I always remember the story that Mike used to tell me that it doesn't take a whole lot of people to make a sale in the auction, because the best scenario is both people have money and they hate each other. Then you have much inflated prices, and that will make our head spin. Then how do I explain this? Right? So even in October, I remember that some people are willing to pay $15,000 per acre in Sioux County. Still, I think it's a little too high, but they still have the money, right? And later I will show you one of the reasons is 78% of the land in Iowa are fully paid for. So if you're a loaded landowner who has already paid all your other land holdings, and you have saved your money that saved from 2003 to 2013, and land tends to be one of the reliable investments that you can hold on for a long, long, long time. Great. Okay. So any question regarding land value at the district level? If not, I will show you some of the county numbers. Okay. So one thing that we do is we're only reporting the average farmland values at the county level because the lack of responses to report high, medium, low at the county level. How we do this is we don't just simply take average of the land values across the counties in this district, but also we also make adjustment based on the last 5 years of census of agriculture. So there are adjustments based on to make sure that the spatial pattern stays relatively the same. So not driven by who the respondents we get. And if you go to the land portal, click on history, we actually have the methodology paper there if you want to. I'm happy to talk with you more on this. But it will give you some general idea why we do the adjustments. So if you think about Iowa, as I told you that Iowa is not uniform in terms of distribution. This is the distribution of the average CSR2, right? So here you recognize this is the Des Moines lobe. Here there's higher CSR, higher land quality. This is a crescent here showing in southern part they have slightly lower land quality. But I want to caution you that this, even if you correlate this average CSR2 with average county level yields, they have 60% correlation with corn yields. They have even like I think is only 20% of the correlation with soybean yields. So this is not the only thing, but this is probably the most important thing because a lot of people actually use dollar per CSR point when they're going out to auction when buying land. Right? So some of our adjustment is based on recognizing that the district level crop reporting district is a political boundary that doesn't necessarily line up with the natural boundary. So this is the crop reporting district overlaid with Iowa Major Soil Association. So this is a Des Moines lobe, right? So this is a lot of other soil major regions, and recognize that even in one district, like the western half of the southwest district doesn't necessarily have the same land value pattern with the eastern part. So in the adjustment, we are making adjustment based on whatever the census tells us how within each soil region the land pattern should be fairly uniform. We based on that. So we adjustment based on that. But making these adjustments often leads to some odd results in the sense I told you that in south central Iowa we reported loss. But let's go back to the county value. All the counties in the region actually reported mild increase, 0.9% on average. So that's where the trade-off is. So we're exploring possible modification to explore how the adjustment might impact the results. But I think there are good solid reasons why we are making adjustment because if you just take sample average of the responses, depending on who you get this year, you could potentially see large swings that is not necessarily representative of the results. But our district and state value are purely based on the responses. Okay, so I just want to let you know of that. So pay attention to this. These 4 counties are the only 4 counties that reported loss, and they are in roughly the same soil region. Right? So that's why that I think that yes, you want to pay attention to the crop reporting district, but there are some underlying geography, geology underpinning these results as well. Again, if you look at the land values this year, the more red you see is the higher the land values. So the highest land value is still Scott County. It's thanks to the urban influence and better transportation network next to Mississippi River. But a lot of those other areas in northwest Iowa where you have stronger, robust livestock returns, but also the better soil quality. Right? So this is the Des Moines lobe area. If you stare at this, if you look at this land value by county map, and I will go to the CSR2 map again, you can see they line up pretty nicely. So spatially, if you look at this land value and look at this again, those are a higher quality area counties. Those are the counties that reported roughly higher land values in general. Okay. Here is the percentage change. As I told you that northeast Iowa and east central and central reported higher growth compared to other places thanks to stronger crop yields, stronger dairy returns, and limited supply for all the counties. And in these areas, that tends to, in the southern part, so the CRP payments not as good as years before. And if you focus on the spatial patterns, you can see that they somewhat line up with the spatial, the soil region distinction. So the counties with similar soils tends to follow somewhat similar movements. Right? That's why I think recognizing some of those is important as well. Any questions so far? Okay. So what is driving the land market? The cited most positive factors Positive meaning that factors that will lead to increasing land values are favorable low interest rate, limited land supply, stronger than expected yields. So I think 2-3 months ago, a lot of people are expecting much lower yields compared to what we have now. Once you have stronger yields, which essentially mean that your per bushel cost will be much lower, then that will translate into a higher profit, higher income, higher land value. Right? And there is stronger investor demand as well, because a lot of the people in the investment community set threshold based on the rate of return. So when the price is lower and the cash rent tends to be even more sticky, the rate of return denoted by rent relative to land values tends to be increasing. Right? And that will peak and sometimes trigger more investor demand as well. And cash and credit availability, I mentioned that there are surprise to me that there are still a lot of people who have working capital, especially those who have a mixed operation in the Midwest, Northwest region. You never run out of buyers who want to buy farmland. There are important distinctions. For example, although I analyze the farmland markets, I cannot buy Iowa farmland because I'm not a U.S. citizen. There are restrictions on corporations buying land as well. So corporations with 25 stakeholders or above cannot easily buy land parcel beyond 1,500 acres.
Has there been a change in the percentage of the strong demand level over the past couple of years?
So this shows up, so this is kind of a mild factor. So this didn't show up last year as more than 5%. So last year maybe 2-3%. So yeah, so I think with the decline in prices, there are growing speculations, growing interest across the community, especially investors. Yep. What are the key factors that drive the land markets down? Commodity prices. Right. Commodity prices, higher input cost, and there are people who are running out of the working capital. You see reports of growing farm financial stress across the state as well, across the region actually, not to a danger level, but still, they're growing. And a lot of people are citing uncertain agriculture future. In part, as you all know, there are negotiations in terms of the NAFTA. So trade is very important to agriculture. It's very important to Iowa because Iowa, I think, is one of the few states that has a trading surplus with Mexico, for example. And 1 in every 4 rows of soybeans growing in Iowa and growing in the United States go to China. Another row go to other countries. Right? So this is very significant, and we're having a lot of major discussion. The 2018 Farm Bill, the new tax law is got ironed out. So a lot of things to watch for next year. So when we are looking at who are buying the land, it's still the same old story. So it's local farmers buying local land. If you look at a lot of times if you're not familiar with the region, a lot of people think that it's the investors ruining my chance to buy my nearby land. The data doesn't support that claim. So it's typically, consistently, we're seeing some fluctuation, but farmers tends to be the dominant buyer of Iowa farmland consistently. Even if you look at Illinois, which doesn't have the anti-cooperative farming laws, it's still the same story. It's the local farmer buying local land. And we broke down this by whether there's local or like a relocating farmers, and you can see that there's still, like, a majority are local farmers. Okay? So existing meaning that a lot of farmers, so USDA defined beginning farmer as people who have less than 10 years of experience. So and a lot of people are concerned about the land access by new farmers. They are always at the bottom, only 4%. But you see that when ag economy is doing better, farm income is improving, more farmer has money, they want to bid into the land market, right? So that's an increase in a share. So with the declining farm income, you will see a gradual pickup in the investor activity. Right? Where are they buying from? Mainly buying from estate sales and retired farmers. That's one of the tricky parts of the limited supply. When you are thinking about you are a retiring landowner and you are doing your estate plan, who do you want to give the land to? Often it's family members, right? So either through will, trust, or other things. Typically, the new buyers that you don't know are not part of the picture, right? So sometimes the long-term tenants get a piece of this, the whole land, the whole farm, but it's not even that is not quite often. So almost 80% of the land are from estate sale and then retired farmers. And if we want to go so if we think about why it's the case, is the land tends to be, and why people are interested in buying this, because even though the current return is not so high and maybe even we still see mild declines, people are not trying to hold this for a year to flip the farmland market. Right? So it's too expensive to flip. More than half of the farmland in Iowa are owned by the same owner for over the last 20 years. 20% of the land are owned by the same owner for over 40 years. 78% of the land are free of debt. Only 20% are still have some sort of mortgage. All these information are from 2012 Iowa and Farmland Ownership and Tenure Survey, and I'm doing the 2017 version. We're finishing the survey responses, and hopefully next spring you will see the results. Okay, so go back to the picture. It's when we are looking at the land that tends to be from family to farm. So it's the situation is limited supply, and what exacerbates the problem is a lot of the transactions are non-arm's length, so it's transaction within family. We also have some information about where the land. So what do you define? How do you define high, medium, low? So it's typically what we find, and Mike and I actually wrote an article about it, is what we find is high quality has a local meaning, that the high average CSR2 for South Central Iowa for high quality land is comparable to low quality land in Northwest Iowa, right? So, and this is the everyone is above average story. So everyone thinks they have. So on average, people think 36% of their land is in high quality. So we also have information about predictions. So we asked the respondents to forecast what the corn prices, soybean prices would be in their area. And on average, people are expecting gradual improvements. So no one is hoping for the $6, $7 corn. But this means that hopefully we will see gradual improvements that will translate in gradual improvements in farm income. That's consistent with my expectation as well. But the recent bump does boost its confidence in the farmland markets, that when people are forecasting how will they see the land values in their region will do a year later, only like 25% of the people expected further declines. So a lot more people expected, so more than I think about 60% of the people expect to see increase. Although they're expecting to see not huge increase, if we think about the 5 years down the road, a lot of people 82% of the respondents expect increase compared to the current level 5 years later. And they're expecting higher growth, right? So 40% of the respondents expected more than 20% growth compared to the current level 5 years later. So, but to caution you again, that this is from Purdue University Ag Economy Barometer, that there are still more share of producers reporting expecting declining land values in their area compared to more people expecting higher land values. This is a nationwide survey of 5,000 producers. And so although you can also argue that the share of people who are expected growth in land values are increasing. Right? So in the last section, I want to give you a quick perspective of my take on how this downturn compared to previous farm crisis. And Christine Tigran from the Ag Law and Taxation Center and I wrote a paper about it. I'm happy to share with you. So, but here I'm going to give you some punchlines. So if we think about the blue line is the Iowa land values, and this is the U.S. net cash income. All these are inflation adjusted and indexed to 100 being the 1910 value. If we define the farm crisis or the golden era, the farm crisis as a significant reduction in land values, there are some key distinctions in these three periods compared to this downturn with the 1980 farm crisis and the 1920 farm crisis. So I'm going to argue that rather than seeing a sudden collapse of the market as we see in the 1980s, we probably will see slow downward adjustments through stabilization as we see in the 1920s in terms of trajectory. So one of the reasons is when you are looking at the income, take out the effects of the inflation. Before we go to the 1980 farm crisis, on average, the farm income, net farm income in the U.S. decreased 3% every year. Because in the 1970s, that's a hyperinflation era where a lot of the asset gains and farm income are what Dr. Neil Harrow used to call illusionary. So, but this time, why people are still having $15,000 per acre to buy in Sioux County is because for 10 years, we have phenomenal growth, 8% growth, even take out of the effects of the inflation. Right? So, and I mentioned that a lot of this time we are even in a much better condition in terms of we have less debt for the whole sector. Right? And you all know that this is the interest rate for the last 150 years. We're at the historical level. Even though the Federal Reserve will raise it, it's not doing it gigantically. It's not nearly comparable to what we had in the 1980s. So no one will going to pay like a 10, 15, or 20% in terms of farmland loans. Right? Back then, that was common. Another thing I want to mention that this time we're more regulated in terms of agricultural lending. So there are more, rather than more individual lenders in the 1920s, we have more institutional lenders, which is more regulated. So the lenders, from the lender perspective, they have less say in terms of whether they can make the loan and how big the loan has to be because there are more rules that tie their hands. Back in the day, the average loan-to-value ratio could reach 80 to 85%. And how the loan collateral value was assessed was based on inflated value. So if your inflation drive your land values, double your inflated land values, then you can get even more loans to buy their neighboring parcel. That's a lot of people got into trouble through that way. Right? So now we have probably only 50% loan-to-value ratio, and how the collateral is valued is based on cash flow rather than inflated market value. So even though in 2012 you're getting $6 for your corn, when we calculate how much your land is worth, we probably only use $4. At least that's Jim Knus at Farm Credit was telling me. Right? So that does make a whole lot of difference, especially for the interest rate, where back in the 1980s, there's no way that you can do debt restructuring and extend your 15-year loan to 30 years, 20 years. And that won't make a difference because the 15% interest rate doesn't allow you any room to maneuver. And those are sudden change. So suddenly then you see a huge spike in the 1981, right? So this time it does make a whole lot of difference when you are having a 15-year farmland loan, extending that to 30 years that will make your payments from $400 per acre to more comparable level to the cash rent. From the owner perspective, so your loss is much lower. Right? So that's why we don't see a widespread financial crisis. But my colleague, Dr. Alejandro Plastina, has a nice article talking about there are growing concerns. People who got caught up in this downturn still face fairly financial difficulties, and there are a growing share of people who, due to declining commodity prices and stuff like that, right? So in the end, I want to highlight there are, this is a portal again, that we have made some improvements, and hopefully when you go there, you should be able to click on that and try to search data by the county and by the district. When you go there, in the overview page, we'll also preload the county. So if you select your own county, we'll tell you more information about it. We'll also direct you a specific figures and maps for your county as well. So, but it's always a work in progress, and I appreciate feedback on how to make this useful to you guys and to your clients. Another thing is I want to recognize that in case you haven't noticed, there's a growing websites and apps that is termed as Zillow for farmers, right? So they have acrevalue.com, turva.ag, and People's Company used to now is partnering with AcreValue in creating a lot of those sites that pulls a lot of public information into better display of farmland sales. So, for example, my students in the appraisal class use this, and that saves a lot of headache in learning the technique and finding information. For example, I'm working with, Turva was founded by one of the senior at Ag Studies at Iowa State. So I was partnering with him that where you can see on the left is where the sales are. So each of the dot represents a sale from a year ago, and he also features like the green dots. Is a little hard to see here, but you can see where the forthcoming auctions are. So there are better information out there, but still, it's through the survey we will figure out it's really hard to look at one recent sale and figure out where the land market is going. I'm doing research now. We're finding that people tend to focus more on the broader scale rather than individual county. Even though I'm providing land value estimates, it seems that people are looking into what's going on in my crop reporting district. So I can say with greater confidence that my district, my larger area, is increasing or not. It's increasing 2%, 10%, 5%. I lack information to say more concretely about my own county. Right? That makes sense. So in the end, I want to highlight some of the Chinese efforts I mentioned earlier. In case you don't know who this man is, this is the current U.S. ambassador to China, Iowa former Governor Branstad. Who is this man? President of China, Xi Jinping. Then he was Vice President of China. So they were in Muscatine, Iowa in 2012 during his state visit that they're holding a picture they took together in 1985. This is one of the key reasons why Governor Branstad was chosen as the ambassador. Back in 1985, when President Xi was a county agricultural leader, he went to Muscatine, Iowa, and stayed in one of the host family farm for a week and met then Governor Branstad and established a long-term personal relationship. And when President Trump was in China earlier last month, Governor Branstad, very, very unique, he was actually first in line in the lineup of U.S. officials before his boss, Secretary Rex Tillerson, which is very unconventional, because they all know that he is a good friend of the Chinese president. And both parties are recognizing this, and China literally is rebuilding a 4,000 U.S. acre demonstration farm, Kimberley demonstration farm from urban Iowa in China. So the news title was China imported a farm from Iowa. And President Trump also recognized this, and the Chinese government actually is throwing annual concert during the Spring Festival. So in February this year in Muscatine, Iowa as well. But one of the most memorable moments of the President Trump's visit was his 6-year-old granddaughter, Arabelle, was singing Chinese songs and reciting Chinese poems. So during the state dinner, he played a video. I probably need to learn from the first family how to teach a kid in the United States to learn Chinese. So I'm struggling a little bit with my 3-year-old. To capitalize on this, the university want to invest more on Chinese agricultural efforts to introduce to Iowa, Midwest, and U.S. stakeholders and policymakers, farmers, and ag professionals what's going on in Chinese agricultural markets and policy. So we wrote a series of papers, including the China's new corn policy, which got a week later got translated into Chinese and got retweeted by IDOL Secretary Bill Norsey. And we have a bunch of other things about China's new ethanol mandate. We have information about where corn is growing, pork is growing. We have a new website where you can go card China. It's led by the director is Dr. Dermot Hayes, is a well-known ag economist in the state. And we're working together to get the word out. So I would appreciate that you check it out in addition to the land value portal. And this was just put out online yesterday. Yep. So in the end, I want to show you that we probably care too much about our position, that this is my bad influence and my mentor, Dr. Ted Hart. So this is his car, so he's a crop marketing specialist. So this is a crop market. This is mine, says farmland. And now we're in cyclone country rather than Hawkeye country, so I'm safe to say that the red is not only good for cyclones, but also good for Buckeyes. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to stay here for any questions.
You obviously talked about the fact that, how to say that, downward prices kind of keep people from selling to some extent. How long can you keep that up? I mean, at some point, if prices don't come up.
So, if I go very quickly, go to the sale activity number, if things continue to deteriorate, then people will be forced to sell, right? So that's one of the things that I'm watching is whether the growing foreign financial stress leads to forced sales. For example, when the theory started, that's 1985, 1986, 1987, that the red line, their record high level of people reporting less sale. So I think there are huge peak in terms of sales in the late 80s. That is, a lot of those are forced sales as a result of the farm crisis. I don't think we reached that point yet, but recognizing that the farmland market is a very same market, meaning that it doesn't take a whole lot of sales to move the market. That's why I have the caution, because I heard from some of the lenders, they are advising some of their clients to liquidate part of the assets. If you have some more sales on the market, then these farmland supply could be eased a little bit to let the income and interest rate trends to work its way. That's why I think that potentially, yeah. So
comment about how much impact industry taking farmland out of production has on this survey. The Milwaukee Data Center for Apple is going to be about 2,000 acres, and recently the city of Ames annexed about 1,300 acres of mostly farmland to the east of the city and intends to build an industrial park there. Does that have any impact on the state levels or at the county level of farmland value?
Not necessarily. So because if you think about 1,300 acres is fairly big, but it's on average like a lot of people actually farm more than, so some commercial farm is way bigger than even that size. So a lot of farmers like farm 10,000 acres, and on average, U.S. I think in Iowa I think people operate almost 400 acres on average. So again, this is like Iowa has anti-cooperative farming laws. There could be some more impacts when you are looking at Illinois, where 2 years ago, Farmland Partners, a real estate investment trust, bought 22,000 acres in one of the $200 million deal. But those still have like more localized effects, more of a signal rather than more substantial impact. So again, as you look at the broad schemes of things, then there are growing interest in the investors, but probably their share will increase from 23% to, at best, maybe 35%. So it's still dominated by the existing local farmers buying things. So the share of the farmers buying land has never dropped below 60%.
Well, the other question, I guess, related to that, the share of farmers, is the share of farmers selling, and I know you addressed that a little bit. Do we have any idea of knowing, when we talk about actual farmers selling as opposed to estates or heirs, if most of those are selling to relatives or if that's actually going on the open market?
So in general, people want to sell to people related. So a lot of the sales are family related. So even they sell, often it is family probably will be the first line of interest. If they don't have that, then they will go to the market. That limits the sale. But the continued decline in commodity prices, at least we do extension talks across the state, and over the years we have seen and heard more people saying that farming is no longer fun because they continue to lose money. Back in the day, 10 years ago, they continue to make huge money, right? So, but so far we haven't seen a lot of people are thinking whether they want to downsize or retire. There are definitely more people. That's why it's important to do a survey like the ownership and tenure survey, where we'll see information about what is the plan. So a lot of times people will will to heirs, and that is within family, or sell to family, or put in a trust. So a lot of people in the past a few decades, the trust has been one of the major reasons, because 20% of the land are owned for sentimental reasons. So they want keep the land in the current use. So the trust is one of the ways to guarantee that. So
the other question is, you mentioned the uncertainty issue.
Yep.
And trade, obviously.
Yep.
What about things like the tax bill? Does that have any influence at all on this discussion?
It will, but one of the things earlier a lot of people are watching, I was watching, was one of the situation known as a step-up basis. So earlier when we were talking about the elimination of the estate tax, people are talking about whether that provision will be eliminated as well, which under that you could delay your sale or transfer till death, then you don't have to pay capital gains taxes. It seems the draft capped those, or even increased more of the depreciation caps and a lot of those. So I think there's roughly no substantive change in terms of the agricultural tax. If there are changes, it's more incentive for large-scale land purchase and depreciation, especially equipment purchase, if those caps got increased, right? So, which I don't necessarily think that's a good timing to do, because when you incentivize a lot of people buy too much machinery and land, that tends to put them more in the higher risk level. So, but as you know, everything that is at the federal level takes a long time to iron out to see what's actually in there. It takes even longer to see what the actual impact is. So, but it's something certainly that people are going to watch. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much for staying here for a long time. Yep. Thank you. Feel free to check it out, the web portals, and sure. Yep.
There we go. That's a good one. Let me try one more. Darker than the ones I took before. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yep.